Welcome to the Pull the Chute podcast with Jeff and Jana. This is our weekly venture into the world of small to medium-sized businesses and the entrepreneurial spirit that drives success.
So our goal here is to help you grow and to be the best you can be, both in business and personally. To do that, we identify and we discuss topics that will hopefully help you as you work to build a successful business.
We also interview business owners and executives. It's our hope that you may be able to gain insight on ways to help you be a better leader and provide a better culture for your people.
Our mission here is to help you pull the chute once a week to work on your business instead of always working in your business.
So we hope you find these discussions insightful, helpful, and useful.
And thanks for your support. We hope you enjoy today's podcast.
Well, welcome everyone to the Pull the Chute podcast with Jeff and Jana. We are so excited that you are here supporting us. Jana, how are things in Nashville today?
Honey, it was in the 70s yesterday.
Nice.
I mean, I was dying to go out and garden and all. Oh, don't do it. It's too early. It's a tea. But yeah, it's been beautiful here the last couple of days.
Awesome. I love it. I love it. Here too. We've had some good weather in Chicago as well. So, hey, Jana, we have a very, very interesting guest that I'm very excited to introduce Hugh Massie, and just to hear what he has to say. But you know, he does things with DNA and behavior and culture.
Oh, yes.
And man, I'm just, you and I love to talk about that stuff. So, Hugh, welcome to the show, first of all.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Jeff and Jana. I'm excited.
We are too. We're excited to dig into this. Yeah.
So, Hugh, one of the things that we always like to do for our guests is, because you guys can do it way better than we ever could, is tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and how you got to where you're at today. And then we'll kind of launch into some great conversations.
So I've got a very different journey than most for someone being in the field of human behavior. So I often refer to myself as a reformed accountant. I started life as a CPA, or in Australia we call it chartered accountant. So from my accent you can tell I'm not from Nashville, Tennessee, or Atlanta, Georgia, where I live right now. Originally from Sydney, Australia.
Mm.
And when I finished my chartered accounting or CPA career in Arthur Andersen many years ago, I went and set up a wealth management business. And it was in that journey, somebody asked me, Hugh, what are you really passionate about? And I wanted to help people all over the world become more financially self-empowered. And with a little bit of reflection and work and going into my journals and thinking, gee, this is something really deep I haven't thought of before. But I've answered the question, what's it all about? Well, it's human behavior, and in particular, how people deal with money, and that money causes people stress, and their attitudes about money drive a lot of their decisions. And I need to get to the bottom of that. And when I set up my wealth management business, I wanted to provide a hyper-personalized experience to clients. I don't know that I totally knew what that was, other than that, how can I put a tailor-made suit on every person? And I started to connect the dots that to do that, it was all around human behavior. Mm-hmm. And then lo and behold, I had a chance meeting with a organizational psychologist who was English, but she was living in Australia, who said, Hugh, what you're talking about in your behavioral theory, that people make instinctive decisions when they're put under pressure and they revert back to their natural DNA style. That's what you're wanting to know. And because I was seeing people have these behavioral flips under pressure, what the sort of the socialized setting or the interview setting was different to the pressure cooker setting, and how people behave there. I need to know that. And so I hired her, and she helped me build a system, because I said, I want to have this as a system.
Mm-hmm.
And then that brought me to America, and we validated the system that I have today at DNA Behavior, psychometric system, personality discovery, if you want to call it that, at Georgia Tech University, Georgia State University. We did a lot of work over a long period of time. We still do work on it, and we built a system. And the idea was to understand not only a person's talents, how they want to be communicated with, related to, but also how they deal with money.
Mm-hmm.
And I then decided that's going to be my day job. I love this more than helping people with their investments and things like that. And so I've gone down this journey over the last 20 years. And I think that's how I get to you guys, because a lot of it really is about building culture.
So talk to us about that a little bit, Hugh. When you say DNA behavior, this fascinates me because I've, been in business as well for 25 years, and I
Yeah.
made one really bad decision, and it's I'm kind of paying for it, still paying for it. But
Yeah.
all that to say, it was based on a good principle of wanting to help people and all that. I just partnered with the wrong person. That's neither here nor there. The point is, I'm fascinated when you say when people make instinctive decisions, like in other words, are when you're talking about if they're under some kind of a time crunch, or you just mean emotionally they have a dream, or they have something that they want to move forward with, then based on their DNA. So tell us a little bit about the differences, like when you say I'm interested in this.
So we are all, Jana, hardwired in a certain way, which starts from when we're conceived through to about 7 years old. But a lot of it is our hardwiring in terms of our talents, how we're going to react to situations, the things that we can do easily, whether it's, talking, setting directions, or being cooperative, group
Mhm.
orientated,
Mhm.
innovative. They're our instinctive, naturally wired up talents
Yeah.
that are there from early in life. And my view is that that's where people go back to when they're under pressure. We
Yes.
can be socialized through schooling, relationships, business settings, whatever, to behave or operate a different way, or that you're supposed to do something different. Like I was an accountant, but you're not told to be creative. It's like creativity and risk taking are shut down in that. But
Right.
that's what I naturally am. And
Yeah.
so, but particularly under pressure, you will revert back to that natural instinct.
Mhm.
You can't. It's hard to cover it up, to stop it happening.
Mhm.
Um, and you'll see it in your children or your grandchildren. You'll see them just naturally. You're going to have a talker, and you're going to have someone that's a lot more quiet and reserved and thinking in the corner and whatnot. Well, that's hardwired into them. They weren't taught to do that. It's just like, the whales aren't taught how to migrate back up to Alaska every year and then come back down, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so we all have that inside us. And that, in a way, that's our stress response, but also it's where our talents exist. And how do we harness all of that? And that's the key thing. Now, it's not saying that you must operate that way in all settings, because sometimes to talk too much, if you're a good talker, loose
Yeah.
lips sink ships. You got to know when to slow it down, or how do you listen better, or you can be a good, logical, rational decision maker, but that might mean you're cold with people. You might be too analytical. So you got to warm it up, but you've also got to put yourself in situations where you can flourish.
Yes.
Um, and I think that's what I'm talking about with the natural hardwired behavior. But with that, what our theory was, and what we've practiced and we've seen and we've proven in research, is people's financial decision making a lot of the time follows that as well. If you are of a certain style, you will be more naturally a spender of money.
Hmm.
Or if you are naturally of a certain style, you're more likely to invest in innovation.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
or you're
So
going to take risks, right?
yeah, I was going to say, so you're basically marrying this behavior, these formative years that you learned that behavior, which we're a big proponent of. Jeff and I talk about that all the time with communication and leadership skills and all of that. Your formative years are when all of that stuff is set up. And so what you're doing is you're marrying these patterns of behavior with the types of financial situations that people get into, or the type, how much risk somebody is willing to take, or what somebody wants to invest in, like more IT versus investing in the arts or something like that. Is
Right.
that
And,
kind
and,
of
and
it?
yeah, and that can be, Jana, at a personal level, but also it's at a business level. And we've done a lot of work on business leaders in looking at the decisions they make in their companies, which companies are profitable versus other companies that are not as profitable in their sector. And there are some key financial behavior traits of leaders that drive profitability.
So tell us about those. We want
So,
to
so,
know
so for
people.
example, so for example, one is just outright financial goal drive. So are you going to be strong on sales, fill up a sales pipeline? That's probably a sort of an obvious one, but it's strong. The next is the preparedness to invest in innovation. So it's not only being innovative, but to actually back it. They're two different things that need to come together. And the third one is resource utilization, or what we would call fiscal control. The companies that do better are better at fiscal control. Now, in the end, all three of those behaviors need to be very strong to get results. But there's got to be some balance in the leadership team as well, because one of the key ones that I haven't mentioned is your ability to engage people. So the relationship engagement, which is
Yes.
the people culture, is the leadership team, the senior leadership team, starting with the CEO, prepared to invest in the people culture. And investing in it is not just lip service. Oh, yeah, it's important and people are important. Actually making it a priority and a financial priority.
Yeah.
Some people are more likely to do that than others.
And that's what we talk about, that people culture. That's to us, that's the most important thing.
It
Because
is
that's
at the
the thing. Yeah.
it is at the end of the day. You've got to have what I would say is you've got to have the talents to make money, if you want to call it that. But you've also got to, but coming with that, you've got to balance that out with having the right people in the team in the right slots.
Yes.
But importantly, manage the right way. And my big, you've got to engage people, whether it's employees and the clients or customers. But one of my hot points is psychological safety. And I think that, if you're so ruthless on the sales end and the cost management end, but you can't create a psychologically safe in working environment, you will get no engagement, you'll get no innovation, and the business falls apart. And that's the delicate balancing act.
Okay, so let me jump in. I want to make sure I understand and our listeners understand. So when I was a kid growing up, my DNA is wired a certain way. And I always tell people I'm who I am because of who my dad wasn't. Right.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
what I mean by that is my dad was a Depression kid, right? Grew up in the Depression. Safety was the big thing. He would sit at the kitchen table and talk about idea after idea after idea, but never move on anything because he was afraid to do that. I have just the opposite effect. I'm like, I don't want to say woulda, shoulda, coulda. So if I see a good idea or if I find something that entices me, I'm willing to go after it,
Yeah.
kind of full bore. And so if I understand what you're saying that's part of who I am from my DNA.
Right. It's part of who you are from your DNA, which is genetics, but also the early life experiences. So the genetics part is actually of that is probably 25%, 20 to 25%. It's how you've responded, Jeff, to the early life experiences. Right. So in a way, you had a father that was probably pretty tight in the purse strings,
Correct.
fairly sort of controlling or not wanting to be out of control. This is the way you operate, which is not a criticism of him. That is who he was and a sign of the times. And you've come out and done the opposite.
Yeah, and I am completely the opposite. I'm willing to
Right.
take the risk. I'm willing to go for everything.
But I would say this is how you're wired and how you've responded to the early life circumstances that you've had, and then you've taken that out into life, and that basically there's nothing that's going to stop you, right? Other than your own mind, right? Because you and I will probably be pretty similar in that respect from what you said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
I'm driven to be successful.
like, my early life was my father died when I was one, and my mum was still pregnant with my brother. And so that's part of my hardwiring, right? That creates a drive. But that's part of that life experience has been part of, my drivers as such. It's not just the genetics that we were given but both my brother and I had the same parents, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. And I don't know if this fits into it or not, but I remember a study that talked about how you were born when you were saying your mother was pregnant, how you were born is kind of how your life goes, right? Meaning, if you needed help, if they needed to take the spoons and pull you out, you've always needed help in your life.
Yeah.
In my case, I came out so fast, my mom, they weren't even ready.
Oh,
And that
that's
has been my
funny.
life completely ever since.
The very interesting point you say about that to validate it is, my dad died of, and this is not a poor me story in any way, but my dad, when I was 6 months old, diagnosed with terminal, basically a brain tumor, or brain cancer, and then my grandfather was his father was in the middle of passing away as well. So there's a lot of,
Wow.
let's say, medical nurses and doctors
Yeah.
and whatnot, and mothers, my mother and grandmother running around. Okay, where's the world going to here? It's not a great environment. Um, and I'm left as a little baby, sort of to my own devices to some way, right? Um, Not because that obviously I was fed, but not, um, but emotionally to some way. And
Yeah.
it's not their fault. But for my brother, and there's a syndrome there where he's in my mother's womb at that time, right? And there's an over nurturing going on because here's a child coming into the world without a father, right? And so that leads to the opposite, right? And that's not that's not saying anything about him, but we are polar opposite as
Wow.
brothers who are 15 months apart, right? But it goes to Jeff's point in how you come to the world and what goes on emotionally, not emotionally, the situations all plays into this.
So now, Hugh, when you do this kind of work, do you do it as like, do you coach businesses? You go in and say, Mr. or said business, your CEO tends to be this type of a person, or he's kind of wired to be a risk taker, or he's wired to be pretty conservative. So he likes a lot of savings, or, he likes to have a big nest egg or a big amount of revenue underneath him before he's going to take chances. So
Yep.
you go into these companies and you sort of analyze the C-suite or the sales teams and such on a psychological basis. It's interesting because Jeff and I have talked, we've interviewed hundreds of people and coaches and such, and it all kind of boils down to, we talk about this a lot. A couple of things. Number one, putting the right seats and butts in the right seats, making sure that you've got the right people that are in these roles. Number two, taking care of your people so that they feel invested
Yeah.
and heard and respected and listened to when they have ideas, not shutting them down. What other elements do you feel that this kind of work has sort of unfolded for you? Like when you go into a business and you talk to people about it.
Yeah. So just to validate what you said, Jana, what we do is we want to start at the top. Ideally, this can only, if you're going to affect transformation in the business and help it unleash its growth, it's got to happen from the top, the CEO, the senior leadership team. So we want to use our system whereby they would complete the assessments to measure out these things and to give them the self-awareness. And then it goes through the teams. And yeah, you're right. What we're talking about is then how people communicate internally. How do you allow innovation to flourish? So I think today in the world with AI, threatening a lot of business models, how's a leadership team going to think differently about innovation in the business and back it? And where are the diamonds in the rough as far as your business is concerned in talents who might be able to lead that innovation? Because it may not be the people that you think. And that needs to be found. So, we're operating at a lot of those dimensions. We're looking at, you know, helping people see the culture, the way you manage money. If you're tight with the budgets, what's that doing to employee engagement?
Mm-hmm.
And how's that affecting the clients? And I think at the end of the day, the real picture is always seen at the end of the day from the clients or the customers, because they're the one that pays the bills. But if the employees aren't engaged, then the clients won't be for very long.
Mm-hmm.
But the problems, I think what I go doing is looking for where's the problem, where's the big blockage in the business. And that may not always be where everyone thinks it is, but it is a people issue. It's an engagement issue somewhere, and we want to find that. Um, and I think you'll find around that psychological safety is an issue in people don't feel comfortable to speak up.
Yes.
or to share their ideas. And that could also be that customers don't feel comfortable to share their ideas either. Now, if someone's just writing in with complaints every day, that's a different issue. That might be saying something, but that doesn't, and they write in the wrong way. That doesn't create psychological safety either. So this is really something that needs to be managed.
Hmm.
Um, but you've got to demonstrate end to end that you care about every person in the business, that you care about all of the clients, and are they a fit? Getting the right people, working with the right people, not only internally but also with the customers as well. So that's something we do. And part of, I think, where our business has been different in the human behavioral area, psychometrics area, is I always said that when we built the system, that if the CEO or the advisors, because we do a lot of work with wealth managers with this, if the person wanting somebody else to complete an assessment is not prepared to show that other person theirs, don't bother.
Hmm. Wow.
And I will say that to a CEO. I've said that late last year to one we were talking, because he wanted to build a more connection-based culture in his business. And I said to him, I won't use his real name, but just imagine it's Jim. I just said, Jim, if you're not prepared to go through this yourself and then openly talk about it and share the results with your leadership team and then through the company, you're never going to build a connection culture. Because at the end of the day, part of the culture, I think, is showing others the way in which things are uniquely done. It's not
Absolutely.
just, saying, oh, yeah, we've got a great culture because we all go out to lunch together.
Yeah.
The culture can be tough in some ways in a business, but there's got to be a friendly element and an approachable element, but it's also part of what's our sort of unique way of doing things, and how do the people do it? And this is a case for bringing people back to the office. I'm not totally on board with everybody having to be there 5 days a week, but you can lose culture if you're just doing Zoom calls. Um, so there's got to be connection. But I think what I'm getting at is it starts at the top. And how do you get people sharing who they are and being authentic? And if the leaders can't be authentic and open about themselves and their strengths and struggles,
Right. So
it doesn't work.
yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't. And one of the key things that you said in that whole dissertation was self-awareness that jumped out at me,
Yeah,
because I got to imagine that that is the key to the success here, is because if
yeah,
people can figure out and get the self-awareness of this is how they're behaving when they shouldn't be, right? It's the thing that I go through, and Jen and I go through when we're coaching clients, is getting the C-level person or the owner or whoever it is out of their own way,
Yes.
and
right.
quit making it about them, right? And if we can get them to do that, that's that self-awareness. Like, do you realize how controlling you are? Everything has to go through you. No. And so that's, to me, that's a big thing. Do you find that to be a difficult piece in some of the things that you're doing?
I think it is a very difficult piece, but I think if you can get people to understand what their inherent strengths and struggles are, and we don't ever use the word weakness.
Mhm.
Because what we
Love
say
that.
is that the struggle is a strength overplayed. So let's say that you are a very planned, detailed person. Well, you could get too picky with details. That's the struggle. If you don't soften that up or lighten that up at times at the right moments, that is then an inherent weakness. But if you just walk up to people and say, look, here are your weaknesses, is anyone going to change? No. We want to empower people in their strengths and give them the right language. That's, I think that's the first thing that is important with this, but it's not easy. Um, but when people start realizing, okay, this is naturally who I am, and they share that in teams, then people will give you grace for that. It doesn't mean bad behavior has got to be accepted, but when people see, okay, this is me,
Mhm.
then it gets easier to start moving to the next steps about, okay, making adaptations in certain situations, dealing with people differently, who need to be dealt with differently, or you've got to lighten it up in a relationship, and so that's really our approach to it. That seems to work.
So do you feel like, and this is one of the things that we like to talk about as well, is muscle memory. So one of
Mhm.
the things, like when I'm coaching people, I go, look, it's a minimum of 6 months because we've got to reconstruct your muscle memory because what you're bringing to the table is
Yeah.
everything that you learned when you were
Mhm.
growing up, to your seventh, and then what your parents were like, and then what your first boss was like, and then what your mentor might have been like. And it's all these things that you react to. And that's why you're behaving and reacting the way you're reacting. So now we got to retrain your muscle memory to maybe not emotionally respond, but to take a step back and kind of go, okay, what's really going on here?
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think it takes Jeff at least 6 months, if not more. But in a way, you want to give people the tools to do some of that themselves. And then there'd be regular check-ins because it could take a long time. Because we are dealing with, in some cases, somebody just emotionally responds. That is probably related to their hard wiring that's been ingrained in them for a long time. We're talking about the flow of the Mississippi River in their head in
Yeah,
terms of
right.
neural pathways. Can you reverse the flow of the Mississippi River? Not that easy.
Yeah.
But you might be able to know, okay, this is a day that I just need to pull over to the side and have a little rest, right? But we're not going to redirect
Right.
the
Yeah.
Mississippi River, but you can rechannel some parts of the behavior.
Yeah. And
Okay, before we go ahead.
I was say real quick for me, when they get that, it is so rewarding. I mean,
Mm.
Yes.
when I see that reaction of, wait, I'm not going to react this way. This is the way I've always reacted. It's like, yes, they're finally getting
Uh-huh.
it. It's so rewarding. What were you going to say, Jana? Sorry.
I was going to say, let's touch a little bit on the AI though before we leave, because tell us a little bit about that the AI solutions, as you were saying, Hugh. When are you talking about bringing in AI and it causing some workers to be intimidated because their jobs are going to be done, or tell us a little bit about that AI and how it relates to the business?
I think that there's a couple of dimensions that AI is people, let's say you're a reasonably long established business in a particular sector. A new entrant might come into your business, into your sector with a new solution that's AI driven and from a cost perspective, wipe you out. I mean, it's sort of the Kodak and Blockbuster situations. Kodak actually had a digital solution, but they didn't back that innovation. If they did, they'd still be here, but
Oh,
didn't have the courage
interesting.
to do it. So that's one side that AI is driving business model changes very quickly, cost structure changes, and what was successful businesses at a certain cost structure that might have been one day at one point being competitive is no longer. And then then you come into tasks that people are doing. Probably 40% of the tasks in a business can in some way be automated, because they're repetitive type tasks. That's all causing, um, that's causing issues. But I think that if you are a business that's operating successfully and profitably today, it would behoove you to be thinking, okay, what do we need to do to stay ahead in our sector and where do we invest? And what things do we put some money into
Mm-hmm.
to ensure we have a new sales pipeline of new things because some of the old isn't just not going to work.
Yeah, that's where I really see it benefiting is just again doing research quicker than a person. You
Yeah,
know?
Oh,
I think that
crazy.
from making a business efficient, it's needed, and I see it in our team. The number of the capability for us to deliver projects in ways that we could never do, couldn't have done in the past. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Um, but also, I think that businesses have to look at their own business models as well, and
yeah,
that requires a mindset from at the top to do that and say, okay, we're doing well now, but there's some threats over the horizon, and you need to take them seriously.
yeah.
Yeah. What I find the most fun with the AI is the analysis of situations and
Mhm.
things of that nature. I take extensive notes with my clients, and then every 6 months now I'm running them through my AI
AI.
assistant. All right. And I'm saying, analyze these notes. Tell me all the things that we've accomplished. Tell me the things that we've missed. Tell me what things we should be looking for. And it's amazing. Just
I,
amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's it's interesting you do that. I think that you could see where somebody shifted their mindset probably.
Oh,
What did they
absolutely.
say 6 months ago and what have they said now? you just, analyze the call recordings, right?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. It's just
Yeah.
amazing.
But these are the things we all have to do. Doesn't matter what business we're in to stay ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, Hugh, we got to kind of wrap things up here.
Yep.
This has been amazing. Boy,
Yes.
what a great topic. Thanks for being on the show so much. If people want to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
So the best way to get hold of me, you can go to our website at dnabehavior.com and see there's plenty of resources there and downloadables, or email me at dnacare at dnabehavior.com. That will get to me. And I'm in LinkedIn, Hugh Massie in Atlanta, the only one, easy to find, and reach out there.
It's great.
Awesome. 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 Well, again, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate your insight. For Jan and I, we always love these. They go for a deeper dive kind of topics. And so it's a lot of fun for us. So thank you for that. And to all our listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed today's show. We did as well. And so we look forward to all of your emails. Keep those coming. Jen and I always love to get feedback. And one of these days, we're going to just start sharing all that feedback once we get into a place where we actually have some time to do those. It's life, right? Sometimes we need to do that. But anyway, to all our listeners, thank you again. We appreciate you as always. Stay safe and be healthy.